So this is the team. I'm William Weinstein, the John H. McFadden and Lisa D. Kabnick Director of Information and Interpretive Technologies. The holder, I think, although Chris has given me a run for my money, the longest title at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Josh Helmer, Chris Atkins, Ariel, Schwartz, and Jessica Milby, and each of them will talk a little bit more about themselves when it's their turn. Which isn't yet. My role at the museum is dealing with the institutional strategy and embodying that strategy in our digital projects. So in 2013, the institution embarked finished a institutional strategy. One of the key elements of that, one of the essential tools that was identified, was building a digital strategy and working cross-departmentally. We also did a brand strategy along with that. And so our institution is one museum, one vision, and one brand. We're supposed to be collaborative, experimental, empowered, digital, and global. And so we had to start our projects and think about our projects with embodying these brand goals. In order to do that from a digital perspective, we had to rethink the way that we did digital. So we had to rethink the way that our departments worked. We had to rethink the way that we even managed digital to change our infrastructure pieces to things that were not just things that we wanted to do, but things that actually empowered institutions to make proper outcomes, to integrate our data systems, to build digital skills throughout the museum, because we really want to share the responsibility. And part of what we'll talk about up here is sharing the responsibility of digital across departments, that it doesn't just rest in our department, it rests across the whole institution. And that's actually one of the hardest pieces that we've had to work out from our perspective. From the digital perspective is really sort of learning how to give up parts of what you do, and learning how to teach other people about what you do so that people can actually be reasonable partners in this work. And then also to be collaborative, to be agile, and be adaptive. So to try to do all those, pieces. Our department reformed, so there was no center for digital media at the time that we started this process, and so we pulled those processes together with our traditional IT department and created the interactive technology section. And then we also created an information management division to sort of deal with the collections information and other institutional information across those silos. But in order to do this, we really needed to decentralize responsibilities. We really needed to talk to other departments, and we were compelled from the very beginning, even before Josh got here and before Ariel got here, to start talking cross-departmentally, to start having relationships for me, to make sure that I have relationships with my senior counterparts in marketing, in the library, in education, and to make sure that we're talking through what we need to do strategically at that top level all the time. And one of the themes that we'll come to all is that all of that actually really worked a lot better with alcohol.
Always. Yeah. What doesn't? Right.
So one of the major initiatives that we started out with was what we call the Art Information Task Force, and a lot of what you'll hear after this is the things that came out of that. The idea was a cross-departmental group that dealt with what we do with art information and how we present art information to the public. So what do we need to do? Which information do we need to build? What information is important to our audiences? How do we want to present that information on interactives and galleries? How do we want to present that information online? That group met for about a year, was co-chaired by myself and the head of the library, and then spawned a number of projects that started this collaboration. And then we'll start talking about those projects now.
Here's my phone. So everyone, my name is Josh Helmer, and I'm the Assistant Director for Interpretation at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's a position that has existed for about 3 years now and was created by our director, Timothy Rubb. Essentially, the charge is to rethink the way we not only engage audiences, but also how we work together as an institution to achieve institutional goals. We've made a lot of progress in 3 years. We've done a lot of great stuff, but we've also made a ton of mistakes when it comes to collaboration. So I'm going to tell you every single thing we did wrong. And when I was writing it and thinking through it, one of the things that was brought to my attention is, well, you're not offering a lot of solutions. Solutions are a really, really tricky thing when it comes to collaborating effectively across a large organization, especially with a decentralized structure like Bill was talking about, and you essentially have to remain flexible. So basically, I'm going to do this Letterman style and give you the top 10 things not to do, and I recommend you do the opposite. Oftentimes, essentially, with collaboration, everybody talks about, because our institutions work in such a and I'm speaking generally, but I think this holds true for all of us, outdated and downright dysfunctional divisions of labor. Collaboration is often discussed as this kind of magical cure for that. Well, if you just collaborate, everyone will agree with everything that I say and everything you say, and we're all gonna be happy and have a voice, and things are gonna be perfectly smooth, so let's collaborate. But in reality, collaboration feels like this. Essentially, you are just holding on for dear life all the time. So, hard-learned lesson number 1, collaborative overkill. My colleagues and I, when thinking about collaboration since today, it has become so convoluted and overhyped as a concept. Basically, hell, it could mean cooperation, sharing knowledge, my favorite, enhanced employee engagement, whatever that means. We found ourselves just valuing the idea of coming together over actually using collaboration the way it should be, which is as a very, very disciplined tool. You have to know when to use it and how you want to use it. Otherwise, it can be disastrous. For example, we had Monday morning team check-in meetings that involved me, Ariel, UX designer, collections interpreter, digital projects manager, head of audience research and analysis, and some web staff. And we never had an agenda, so that was good. And then what happened, because we were just so proud of ourselves for coming together and talking about stuff, we ultimately abused that time and made horrible, horrible decisions on the fly. So, be disciplined. Collaboration is a tool. Don't overkill it. Second, get comfortable disagreeing. One of the things that we also found was, since we were playing collaboration, no one wanted to break the environment that we had set up. So everybody was extra careful about making sure that everybody felt good all the time. And essentially what that led to was a team member, and we're all guilty of this, of course, having bad ideas, would suggest an idea that 8 out of 10 of us absolutely hated and knew we would never actually pursue, but nobody would speak up. And that idea would be pursued for months, only to get killed later, burning morale, costing us time and resources. And if you don't get comfortable with collaboration, you should really, really get comfortable with the idea that every single change order costs about $5,000. So, friction is good, but you have to contain the friction. Essentially, the more back and forth you have and the more comfortable the environment is where you are able to exchange ideas and really bounce things off of each other, you're gonna make a better product. But you have to put systems in check to make sure you do not burn the house down. We came pretty close. So my next several points are essentially going to be things to keep the flames in check. Documenting project goals. This is a really big deal. And this is essentially also where overeager collaboration will really bite you in the ass. Because ideally you want to be collaborative, you want to sit down with a lot of people, and you want to develop project goals as a unit. But when you get multiple stakeholders in a room, all with competing agendas, and not that there's anything wrong with that, you just killed your project before it started. So essentially what we found does work is you have one individual who usually has an objective view of the bigger picture, either project or institutional, draft a set of goals, and then you share them with your respective group, usually via email as a document, and say, hey, let's get some comments and feedback. Everybody feels ownership over those, you adjust them, and then you're actually using collaboration as a successful tool to essentially unite and produce a better product. The other big thing about project goals, and I gotta tell you, we just made 8 interactives, 9 in-gallery videos, and essentially a new section of our website. We rarely had project goals, and it pretty much killed us because you have nothing to lean back on as a unit. You have no baseline. You need to establish that base, everybody clearly understand it, and move from there. And it's not just like base, like project goal is X. You really have to think about the wording carefully so it cannot be misinterpreted. This is the most important thing you can do. Finding the right people. And I don't mean like via hiring process, although you should always be building a new institutional culture if you're looking to change all the time. But when you do start this, if you want to create successful buy-in, you have to invest in basically going around your institution and putting feelers out and having a lot of lunches and find the people who are willing to do new things. It's kind of weird to have a curator with you. And I will, sorry, buddy. they're usually...
Sitting right here.
I know you are. But essentially, if you think about Chris Atkins, the curator brought, he is the Agnes and Jack Mulroney Associate Curator of European Painting and Sculpture before 1900. I would never think to start looking there. But the amazing thing about Chris is completely open into working and thinking in new ways. And what that did for me was it essentially set up an example I could point to. Hey, everybody else, check out what Chris is doing. It's so safe, it's okay, it's all fine. You'll still have a job after you try some new things. So, for example, digital interactives in gallery next to art objects. Giant hurdle for us as an institution. Chris essentially is in charge of our most valuable and rare work of art. It's a 5 by 5 3/4 Jan van Eyck. Chris was willing to put a 27-inch screen next to it. After that, and after everyone saw that that was not going to destroy that work of art, set it on fire, or destroy the museum, everybody wanted to do stuff in their galleries. So it's all about having that example you can turn to. And I can say now, we are unbelievable partners, and we basically change hearts and minds together, which is huge. I would also recommend, do you make some kind of face at that?
No, I raised my
Oh, awesome.
fist. Solidarity.
I thought you just submarined that, and I was like, oh.
There might have been a knife involved.
The other thing is you want to seek out people not just in select areas. You want to basically go around and you want to find one or two of these people per department across your institution, because the more touch points and the more familiarity people have with the type of things you're trying to achieve, the better chance you have at spreading buy-in. The other really, really important thing is once you do find the right people, you have to give them an opportunity to get to know each other. And this is unbelievably pertinent now because I was just in New Orleans for the first time. Alcohol works best, and it's not a joke. Essentially, in our museum is 138 years old. It gets stuck in its ways, so anything you can to bring these people together and to essentially break the traditional ways of people working together and treating each other, the better. There have been multiple times where you do bring champagne and orange juice to a morning meeting if you know there's gonna be some tension in the room around that, and it just sets a completely different dynamic. So, let people get familiar. That also goes to understanding their experiences and skill sets. You should always know as a unit why those people are in that group with you and how you're going to work together. And it's better that you start as friends and disarm those tensions. Defining...
Check your HR rules about the alcohol.
That's true. Defining team roles. This is a really big deal that's going to take you a lot of time and a lot of thinking. Essentially what happened was we were including our entire team in large work meetings, and that was never helping us because people would essentially feel as if their toes were being stepped on by other members whose essential job it wasn't to make suggestions. Not that they were closed to those suggestions, but like when it really came time to make decisions, there was friction. So basically making project teams and knowing exactly why everyone is there and letting them know is huge. So the museum's superstar collections interpreter, Makela Krishnan, please raise your hand. Raise your hand.
Come on, do it. Do it.
Right there. I include Makela on every single project where I essentially know that there is going to be difficulty onboarding, say, a member of the curatorial staff because she's just an exceptional communicator. And she knows she's there for that reason, and the rest of the team knows. So when it comes time to essentially recap or make decisions or communicate what decision has been made, it is known that Makela is the one who speaks. It's just because that's her skill set and it betters our product and the team dynamic in general. Being too inclusive hurts. And that's pretty much what I was just saying. You have to have the right people in the right rooms at the right times. And when you don't, you start to run into trouble. For example, we just made a very large interactive table for one of our exhibitions. And there was a design meeting where a senior manager was bumping heads with a junior UX designer, only because essentially the senior manager was not told that she was invited to this meeting basically just to observe. She was there to see what was going on and see how the project was going, not to make very, very small UX decisions. And in the end, we didn't use that feature. It hurt both of their relationships working together and just wasn't worth it. Number 9, pay attention to the logistics of collaboration. And this is especially important for us as 21st century museum movers and shakers, because a lot of our time, unfortunately, is going to be removing the barriers and boundaries that have been put up by our predecessors and laying new tracks to do new things. And when I say this is, one of our recent experiments has been Slack. Like I said, 8 interactives, 9 gallery videos, 1 website. We started to use Slack as a communication tool, as a way to break down formal communication tracks, such as emails, and also create a working record of decisions and work with vendors. During the past 5 months, 17,831 Slack messages sent, 977 files uploaded. We would never have done that type of work via Outlook. No way. And the team has started to grow custom, and that tool is starting to spread across the museum. It also allows people to take an interest and see what other people are doing all the time. And not in like a creepy Gestapo kind of way, but just to know what's going on. Making these spaces either digital or physical have to be done if collaboration is going to be successful. Because essentially we do not have the tools right now as big institutions to successfully communicate with each other. We just don't know how. So here's the list, David Letterman style, 1 through 9, and I will also add that collaboration is unbelievably hard. And being in my job for 3 years now, the one giant takeaway is, if you are serious about it, it takes an unbelievable amount of maturity and discipline and thought to pull off. You have to be active with it all the time. So, those are my thoughts on collaboration. Chris.
Pass it over, please. Hi. Yes, we specialize in wordy titles in Philadelphia. I'm Chris Atkins, the Agnes and Jack Mulroney Associate Curator of European Painting and Sculpture before 1900.
And I'm Ariel Schwartz, the Cathy and Ted Fernberger Associate Director of Interactive Technology.
And together we co-chaired the Collection Presentation and Information Group, or as we affectionately like to call it, CPIG. This was a... Really?
And that was a
Come on, did we lose you already?
That was actually a mascot from one of the curators in the group.
Yes, we've embraced this. This is part of a tone, which we'll get to in a minute. But this is a group, was a subset, one of the subcommittees, as Bill was talking about, that formed out of the Art Information Task Force. It was made up of representations of each of our 8 curatorial departments. We have about 30 curators. IIT, interpretation, library representation, handpicked by our director, all largely, especially the curatorial staff, mid and junior level staff members. And this was, the task was to explore and define how the museum presents our collections and our expertise digitally. Yes, that's extremely broad. Also, a significant part of this, in truth, was to activate our curatorial staff to begin to try and think digitally and to incorporate us as curators within digital dialogues. And to do this, we very much tried to set and keep a jovial, lighthearted tone. This is Christina Haugland, our Associate Curator of Costumes and Textiles, who does, in fact, bring this pig. And we initiate meetings with Oink Oink to try and keep things going.
So the first major project we assigned to this team was a white paper. We're undergoing a digital roadmap process right now. We're looking to have a set direction for the website, and the first step in that, we decided, was to do a white paper. And we figured this group is the ideal group to set some of the hallmarks of this approach. And what we did is, over a 10-week intensive period of time, work through bi-weekly meetings, brought in outside community members to be part of our team, and intensively and collectively created this white paper. So one of the outcomes of the white paper was to decide what is one of our target groups for digital, and we decided it's the creative group. Philadelphia has a lot of digital workers, which is awesome, a lot of millennials and a lot of artists, so it just made sense that creative class would be one of our targets, not the exclusive.
Yeah, we very early on it became clear, as Ariel liked to say, basic marketing, if you try and reach everyone, you're going to get nobody. So it was really important for us to try and identify a starting point of who we might try and reach.
We also went through exercises to identify what assets do we have to offer to this group. And then finally, what unique propositions can we take with our assets and with that audience to make it attractive for them to come and use our digital.
So this was our approach, and it was very much an effective one. Took how long did we take?
About 10 weeks.
About 10 weeks. No, we didn't. It took us a lot longer than that. But anyway, we had a schedule. It was a while ago. We can't remember how long it actually took. We completed the white paper in May 2015, and it was very successful. We guided it through the process. It was on time, and we really did build a good sense of teamwork and camaraderie, which I suppose I should say, as a very large institution, very much siloed, was something that had not really existed between these particular members before. Now, all that said, so we completed that work. However, after that, after the completion and submission of the white paper, we encountered a series of challenges, basically trying to keep the group going.
And that was really the biggest challenge I think we had is how to turn the ship around next. So we had the success, we had a tangible result, it was very well received, but now, okay, what do you do as the follow-up act, and how do you keep this momentum going?
So we had a project which is in development, which we were trying to create a highlights tour of the collection, something that we really need to do. And so we enlisted the group to try and transition into being more of a work group, because previously we'd been very much more of a think tank sort of brainstorming sort of group, and to transition to a work group. And the reality was, this really didn't work. We were not successful. We tried a variety of different approaches to get our team members, particularly our curatorial staff, to produce results. We tried a number of different approaches, work as the group, as we had with a white paper. We broke into sub-teams. We met with individuals. And frankly, we had a hard time getting traction.
And what we did is that basically because each curator represents a curatorial area, we said, why don't we first try not going out of your comfort zone? Why don't you look at someone else's object from a different department and come up with ideas for how that could be made interesting digitally?
Yeah, don't touch my stuff.
That fell so flat. And we were sitting there actually trying to give them ideas of what the heck do we mean by that. They couldn't relate, and it's understandable. They spent their whole lives, that's their focus, is their area of specialty. And it was so hard to transfer their insights in their area to another area. We're not talking about rockets, we're talking about a different category of art. And it still was very challenging.
That was very challenging. Now, also, we should take some of the blame for this. That we did not define the project as well and as concretely as we had with the white paper. It was very abstract. We didn't have clearly defined project goals. The time frame and the deadlines were not, we didn't establish them. We were just sort of loosey-goosey going about it because we had built up, frankly, this jovial relationship, so we didn't impose deadlines. And also, we were beginning to get a lack of institutional support, presenting this project as an institutional imperative. So this created some problems, mainly that what we began to face was lack of investment by the members of our team. That they began to feel like this wasn't a priority for them, that other parts of their work they felt were more important. They began to push back about the time commitment of our regular meetings. And of course, there was also, as an institutional level, conflicts with curatorial department heads, especially. This was, as it began, we were all junior and mid-level curators, so we were trying to work in this new cross-departmental way, but which was very much intentional, but there was conflict in terms of our responsibilities, our activities with those of us who are direct supervisors.
And we heard more and more, I've got to be out of town, I've got other things, I can't participate. And it became more and more frustrating to try to keep the group together.
So we disbanded. We broke up the band. It was like behind the music, come back in a few times, we'll break out the documentary.
I would totally watch that.
We give up.
You'd probably be the only person, but that's okay. If anybody wants an offer and contract, though, you know where to find me. But we've tried to learn from our mistakes. We've tried to learn from our mistakes, and we have recently rebooted CPIG. Literally just last Thursday, we had our second meeting, and we've really tried to learn from what from some of those challenges that we encountered. So we redefined the membership and its goals, really starting out from the beginning as defining it as a working group rather than a think tank, and then meeting instead of individuals being handpicked by our director, asking for volunteers, targeting people, and saying from the beginning, this is what's coming. Requires investment. I know you have a lot of other things on your plate, but we want to do these things. I think they're worthwhile. Can you join us? And if not, now's the time. Get off the boat, so to speak. And so hopefully this is something that will work. We've also, as we've redefined, because we're working towards the another activity, which is presentation of scholarship. Because one of the other challenges working towards the Highlights Tour, in addition to the other things, was we were really trying to encourage curatorial staff to go into more, forgive the terminology, more populist, public, general visitor. I know I'm not supposed to say that.
We were friends.
Not anymore, I know. It's okay.
You didn't say dumbed down, so.
I did not. We were not trying to dumb it down, despite what some people might sometimes think as part of these projects. No, we really weren't, but it was too big of a leap.
It was
too big
also
of a
very
leap.
conceptual, and that was where we got stuck.
Yeah, so now we're going back, trying to meet curators halfway, trying to think about as reorienting towards the presentation of scholarship, essentially of what curatorial staff do or think we do. And so the digital does not become associated solely with these public outreach sort of things, but becomes part of our work and our conceptualization at a deeper level, just translating our work into a different sort of thing. Again, hopefully this will work, but we're in the early stages, so we'll see what happens.
And the other thing definitely was how rooted it is in an actual project that has a start, an end, a finish, a delivery, clear parameters versus an ongoing kind of brainstorming, getting together on a regular basis and kicking around ideas is much harder to sustain than having a very specific goal at the end that the group delivers. All yours, Jessica.
Hi, can you guys hear me in the back? I'm Jessica Milby. I'm the Assistant Director for Collection Information in Philly. I'm the co-chair of the Collection Information Working Group, and we don't have a pig. We don't have a nickname.
That's a mistake.
I know. I hear you, but we also didn't do a white paper or any of that.
You're not starting off so hot.
So
That's
the point of
they're the group that actually does work. So
yeah.
finally, by the end of this now, you finally got to the people who actually do something.
So the group is comprised of a member from every curatorial department, but that person is generally their collections manager, their department assistant, or administrative assistant. Their person who's sort of the primary power user of our collections management system, which is TMS. My co-chair is Cathy Herbert, who is the collections research and documentation coordinator from the executive office. I think the two of us made a really good team. It's kind of, as you say, we're the ones doing the work, and it's not very glamorous. It's not like writing books and all of that. We're on the boat, but we're in the cheap seats. We're in steerage. So the mandate it arose out of the Art Information Task Force, like CPIG. It was a way to bring the necessary people together to get this work done, and it was really, I mean, this mandate, that's a big task. So it was in order to solve the question of online collection search, among others, we had to ask for a lot more information than we had, and that meant a minimum information standard, and we never really made a minimum standard before, so much less one that required a lot more information than we had. So this was basically a gigantic content creation project, which was new to us. So the important part was we really we stopped trying to make a new and different end product with the same old kind of crappy raw materials. So the main goal, implement the minimum cataloging standard, and when it was kind of about growing the resource with a collaborative attitude, we hoped that was like, rather than a single curator or educator coming up with content X for project Y, that it was more of a group to help make sure what we're adding is truly useful in the long run, that the core collection information is better than platform independent and you can do whatever you want to with it and it's comprehensively applied. I think we weren't great about that. I think we could probably do a better job of that in the future. Implementing the standard also means updating a backlog of skeletal record with information that we knew that the audience was looking for online. We did a keyword search or an index search of the keywords that online users put into our search page, and we found that they were looking for information that we didn't have, like subjects and contexts and that sort of thing. So at the same time, we were asked to deal with a handful of other issues, one of which was the speed with which collection moves were updated in the system and made live online. So if you wanted to search what was on view, are you getting an accurate search result? Applying the standard comprehensively was kind of the biggest collaborative project I think we've ever tried to do at PMA. I mean, it's huge. So I have a few recommendations, kind of like Josh had, about how to manage a sprawling project with very large goals, and I think metrics are important. I did capture them weekly, but monthly, depending on what you're doing. I visualized them using Tableau Public, and I shared them through our SharePoint intranet site. This one is very dramatic on the left because our prints, drawings, and photographs department is 160,000 objects, so they sort of object count-wise dwarf the rest of the departments. But these are all interactive visualizations so that departments could choose their own and look at the list and have it change as they looked at it. I feel like it's important to make sure they illustrate the progress that your group is achieving or the lack of progress, if that's what's happening, because you kind of need to make them aware of that. And you should reward the sort of big jumps, the sort of victories, with personal messages. I brought croissants. We aren't alcoholics. I don't know. Well, we like croissants.
It's always time to start.
I know. I think we might. We did talk about some champagne. So we would bring treats and chocolates and make it, again, like you guys had, a more jovial sort of atmosphere. But I think that we did that later in the game, so it wasn't like we didn't start out that way. It started formal, and then it sort of became friendlier and more jovial. And we exchanged a lot of stupid memes, like, you guys hit 50%, like, and, way to go, like Doge or whatever. Keep everyone on the same page with the updates and with minutes. But I think, consider whether or not you want to share those minutes. Do it carefully, because we initially thought we might distribute the minutes to a larger group. And we found that keeping a safe space for everyone to be completely candid about what roadblocks they were encountering was actually more important than letting other people know what the group was up to. And I used the minutes to make project updates for the executive offices and for the co-chairs of the task force so that they would sort of know where we were, but the who said what, when, isn't on the record for the larger staff. And I think that was important for our group so that we could talk about, what was making it really hard to get the context cataloging to happen and that sort of thing. And I think that was a key decision. So I also think that project summaries were a really good way to sort of make people aware of when we had hit roadblocks. That looks really strange, the image, sorry. So I feel like this integration is kind of like a spoonful of sugar. You kind of have to devise projects that tackle the backlog of all of this information, lack of information, by integrating the new cataloging into existing workflows. So we said that you can't publish this object into the online collection unless you do the context cataloging, unless you do the materials tagging and all of that. Things like examining new acquisitions, all of the stuff that the regular curatorial business was about, we asked the curators to then, add this extra information as well. We did a few other things like blank reports for those curators who wouldn't adopt digital, with the sort of like fill in these fields while you're in storage, while you're inspecting this object, and then one of our group members or an admin assistant in the department would make sure that information got back into TMS. I also think that tackling smaller things like our little bit of, not tiny, but the update on the locations thing was a great way to sort of pepper the group with a sense of accomplishment, and I think it kept our momentum going and kept everyone positive during what is really just 2 years of slogging to make curators do this extra work. So, it's been kind of a nice distraction to do occasionally a little thing that has a good goal. So I also think that you should stay inspired. you need to prove that the work is meaningful in a lot of cases because you're kind of like not preaching to the choir with this. So I feel like in this case, your passion for it can be really helpful. We've watched some stuff like TED Talks, and we distributed articles that were actually interesting, not a total snooze, and links to things that were about museums, that were not about museums, that were just what inspired us about making the data better, about making the collection more accessible, activating the collection in the strategic goal speak. I use this, this was one example. This is just a data visualization of what we could do with better, more accurate date information across a timeline with the history of the museum highlighted. So where are we now? The materials project, for the minimum cataloging standard, we required tags that linked to the AAT be added to the entire collection. So this is complete thanks to several volunteers. Just over a year, we added 364,000 terms for 230,000 object records. So I feel like that was pretty successful. It's not online yet, but when it is, we hope that like your average user who just looks for metal gets the steel, the iron, the copper, all of the very specifically described media information. The other major project is the context cataloging, which is about styles, dynasties, periods, movements. So in this, we're still, this one's a little slower. Materials was less collaborative, context is more collaborative, and that just means more people, which means things slow down a little bit. We've been setting goals in percentage as well as in object counts to sort of say, we'd really like you to meet this quota by each month. We'd also like you to hit 35% by this date. That's been pretty successful. We also batch update information. My team in collection information will accommodate just some of those leaps you saw on that graph by just scripting the changes across object packages. And I think this is one of the more exciting projects because in the past we've really been limited. If we talk about Impressionism, we can talk about it in terms of 5 Monets that somebody said were Impressionist. But we have so many more. We have works on paper. We have a lot of really great drawings and other things that we can talk about, especially Dada and the Surrealist movement. There's a lot of great stuff in the collection. But until all of it is tagged that way, until all of it is described that way, it's not really discoverable online. And I feel like it's not discoverable in Google either, because most of our object page hits are coming from search engines. So when this information is added online, we're going to be picking up people who are just looking for cats and flowers and whatever when the subject's part of the project is done, and it'll be great to get that extra traffic. It'll be great to get that extra look and engagement. We've had a lot of challenges, depending on your organization and your administrative structure or whatever your silos of people are. It's going to be different, but I think a few of them are universal. Digital projects are going to involve analog thinkers, which we've all touched on that. I think you have to translate carefully, creatively, respectfully. It's also visually, I think it's important to describe things and diagram the crap out of everything because museum people are pretty visual. In addition, when you are, for instance, the collections manager in a curatorial department, you're not in a position of authority to say to a senior curator, you didn't do your cataloging this month. It's pretty awkward. So it's not a good position to be in, but it's one that when you're part of a large team of people who are all doing that same sort of awkward stuff, the brainstorming about how to get it done has been pretty effective. We're getting there. We're over halfway done. So. But at one point we had to design a project plan for every department and send it to the department head and say, please ask your department to do it this way. And that was pretty successful at first, lost momentum. A lot of things, have a bit of buildup and then sort of taper off. And everyone has different priorities. Getting on the same page can be really difficult. So how do you keep your head above water? I think you have to wear floaties. But yes, no. Being flexible and responsive, and that includes sometimes changing deadlines. You have to sort of take into consideration things that are impacting your rate of work and really focus on why those things are happening and see if you can eliminate that roadblock or work around it if you have to. The backlog projects for the minimum cataloging standard have been incredibly time consuming. Like I said, the context is halfway done in 2 years. Materials was just my team, so we were able to do that more quickly. but we had never done this massive kind of a project before. There's going to be some finger pointing, and your colleagues are going to. It's just going to be the pot calling the kettle black, pretty much. And I'm guilty of it too. It's deprioritizing work. They mentioned that, regardless of deadlines, which is frustrating. Co-opting project time for things that are more glamorous than cataloging, because cataloging is like a dirty word because it just puts people to sleep. But if you talk about like search engine optimization with better metadata, they're like, whew, sexy. Only because we're nerds. But generally people are questioning the value of the work, in deeds, if not in words. So my theory was to be patient, very patient, and lead by example. So in conclusion, you're not going to like each other. You're not going to get along, and it seriously doesn't matter. What does matter is that you do figure out how to get things done, right? So the end result kind of might be this like mutant shadow of the thing, this glorious thing that you envisioned. It might be 75% cataloging instead of 100% cataloging. You might miss the mark in terms of your audience goals. Like whether it's the crowning achievement of museum technology or a garbage pile, you have learned how to work together. So in incredibly trite terms, it's the journey, not the destination, right? So if in the boat metaphor, if you don't all learn how to row together, you're not gonna get anywhere. And I think once you figure that out, even if you don't 100% hit the mark, it's not a bullseye, that product is not exactly as you envisioned it, at least you're all going in the same direction. So next time you do a collaborative project, everything's a little bit easier, and that's what I hope for the moving ahead. Everything you just saw is in the PMA collection, and there are the citations. So thank you, everyone.
So that's us. So one of the themes that have been coming around the conference was, what is the ongoing role of chief digital officers or people who are responsible for digital across the institution, and how does that work when you're actually trying to work collaboratively? And so this is how it works. So we have people that are not part of the technology department that are leading projects, that are conceptualizing projects, that are working together with the technologists, working together outside. We have projects that are oriented in our group. And it's at the stage that we're at, we've been at it for about 2.5 to 3 years, as we said. It's still a little messy, but the cultural change that all of us are talking about, the cultural change that has been talked about a lot in this conference, is been embodied in the work that we're trying to do, and we've been successful. We've made some stuff that we're all really proud of. We've yelled and screamed at each other and stopped talking to each other for a long time and acted like children often. But we're still here. We're still sitting together at the table. There's more actually left back at the house that'll sit together with us, and we're slowly changing the culture of the institution to do these projects, which is essentially the goal of what we're trying to do.
Questions?
I know where to get the best croissants in Philadelphia, so if you want to know.
What's the number of staff?
Overall, it's a little over 500.
Over 500. So that means you each have large teams to work with. And I'm wondering, what would you recommend for smaller institutions, like medium and small institutions that don't have as big teams as you guys have to draw on?
That's an excellent position to be in, because
Might be
having too many people,
easier.
too many people in the room really means that it's like a meeting of 15 people is not terribly effective, but a meeting of 8 people, you guys can get a lot more done. So, I mean, I can't suggest that how who to put in the right place at the right time, like who belongs in the room. But having a smaller group, I think, is a much more productive meeting.
And it's a question of roles, really, not a
Yeah.
question of numbers. So really, what you want to make sure, no matter how many people, you could do this with 2 people, 3 people, 10 people, but as long as everybody knows why they're there, as long as everybody knows what they're responsible for, and as long as everybody's held accountable. It's in fact not size. We get to do things in-house that are bigger because we have staff to do them, but because we're bigger, it doesn't mean that we can do things different than other people can do them. It's just sometimes we can put more staff in place to do it.
It also brings me back to the idea of goals. I think probably for a smaller unit, they're even more important, because one of the things that really hurts us and allows collaboration to break down and frictions to arise is, in a big house, you can go to other people to get similar stuff done. So there's a lot of back channeling and a lot of breaking of processes that is almost impossible to stop. So I'd say you focus on the goal part. If you can essentially create buy-in and clarity at that step, that should help greatly. Being big is not always better.
Right. So you have
Yeah.
the big institution lamenting that we're not small, and the small institutions lamenting that they're not large, essentially.
The grass is always greener.
With the project team roles and lines, did you have somebody who was responsible for team dynamic and things like that?
No.
I feel like as part of our working group, my co-chair and I we're very conscious of how we work together as a group. We had people from the library, and they were very key at the outset, and we had, like, as I said, all the curatorial staff. Some were really keen to speak up and talk about what was going wrong with the projects in their department, and others were not. And to some extent, making it a 2-hour meeting sounds awful, but every 2-hour slot, we did like a 30-minute, 45-minute, maybe an hour meeting, and had an hour afterwards where those people who were less, like, I'm going to speak up in front of 15 people, would still come to us, to Cathy and to myself, and say what was going wrong. So we were able to get, to find out what we needed, even though it wasn't, not everyone is going to talk, like, willingly in front of all of those people about how their bosses are failing them.
One of the other things that was also interesting is that essentially there were some roles created that are not responsible for reporting to a department. So essentially in my job, I am free to float in between, and having that ability to go out and bring disparate groups of people together has helped a great deal. Like, so Ariel and I are both relatively new, and Chris is also new. We've all been here about 3 years now. And with that ability, lack of what I call institutional scar tissue, it has us allowed to go out and effectively search out the right people, and then really, really think about how we're gonna build and include, and who not to include yet, and how to get them on board, and we spend a lot of time doing that. So it's not all haphazard. Very House of Cards. Just with a positive spin.
And it also collapsed pretty easily.
Yes.
I just also wanted to add that, especially in the CPIG group, but generally across the board, as Josh said, Chris is an amazing collaborator and a curator with such an understanding and openness about digital applications of the content that it's just such a pleasure to have someone like him to be able to work with.
And a great scapegoat.
That too.
Well, it goes back to, this isn't really a question, but
Actually, a very good spy.
It goes up to what has come up in some of the other sessions, is just listening to each other, and I know many of my colleagues don't listen to other people in other parts of the museum. But frankly, things like the Art Information Task Force, the previous iteration, which we didn't really talk about too much, was a fantastic starting point for just getting some of us together. It did have concrete goals, but just getting people, we are a large institution, and so frequently, I think there were cases where people literally didn't know who somebody was.
Yes, the first few meetings we were introduced people to, especially across curatorial staff, there were people that just had never met some of the other people in the room.
So setting up mechanisms for dialogue, even if it's geared towards one outcome, there are tremendous other ancillary outcomes that can come out of just getting together.
Yes?
So this is sort of another, is the grass greener question, but you had a very clear kind of top-down mandate for this type of work, and I'm wondering if there are aspects of what you've experienced that you think might be different in the positive sort of way, or just different or maybe the same, if that mandate did not exist.
We would have failed miserably. I think it doesn't have a question of size. We had the benefit of this is that this was a mandate from our director, that he came in with this idea and an incredible amount of patience to allow us to sort of figure out how to do it. But the idea was that this kind of collaboration, that this kind of sharing of responsibility, that the empowering of other staff in order to do this work, especially curatorial staff, to be more partners in this kind of work was a core part of what the institutional strategy and mission is going to be. And so there's a lot of going around, as Josh was saying. You can go up and you can go down, you can go around, but a lot of the times when people would come to the director, he'd force people back and listen and do this sort of thing. But his overall goal is to make sure that this works. And you can do it small or big, but if you don't have that support, if you don't have somebody who can compel everybody to do something, then you can't get anything done. So.
But also, I don't want to. Well, I give Timothy a lot of credit for the changing of the culture at the PMA, especially from what it was about 7 years ago to what it is now. It's basically been a night and day shift. He has also been relatively ambiguous with this. So yes, he will serve as a redirect.
Completely ambiguous.
You left that part out. So he will serve
Part
as
of
a
his charm.
redirect for bigger issues, but a lot of it has also been left up to us to sort out. And I cannot stress enough, my job at the Philadelphia is the first job I've ever had. And one of the reasons I was able to get here and when we all got here, essentially working together, is because we were willing to go out on a limb and take accountability and start initiatives and bringing people together that were not necessarily exact directives. We basically had the ambition to start to make it better for everyone and put ourselves out there. And there are a lot of vacuums and holes in American art museums, probably all art museums, that can be filled by staff who are willing to go, we have a problem. I'm going to call that meeting. Let's get together and work that stuff out because this is crazy.
I think that to some extent, the collaboration part of it was top down, but the actual, what is the work that you're going to do was in the part of that vagueness, that the task force decided that the minimum cataloging standard was a result of the task force, that they decided we need to make collection search better, we need to make these resources better, and the only way to do that is to require a minimum standard of information. So, but that bubbled up from within the group. Like Timothy didn't say, we need more data, right? Like a director's not gonna say that. So I feel like it was the collaboration was, you guys have to figure this out together. And then the good thing is that when we did start to figure things out, it was, for me anyway, I was like, yeah, that's what I want.
Right. Yeah. So it's allowing the staff, it's the idea of empowering staff. So the idea is that it's not, so he is ambiguous. It's not directed. He actively says that he doesn't want to tell us what to do, because if he tells us what to do, we won't want to do it, we may do it, but we're not actually ever going to learn how to work together. And so the idea is that we just all, we can do these things, we can think about them. The only mandate that we get is that we have to actually continue to work together. The only time that I get yelled at or called in is that if I'm not having meetings with my opposite numbers, if I've stopped having meetings with somebody because I'm angry or something like that, I'm throwing a fit, or they're throwing a fit, and we stop having our weekly meetings, I get a call and says, hey, you're not meeting with the head of marketing, you're not meeting with the head of the library, you get back in there and do your work. And that's how that gets done. But what we do and how we decide priorities, all that is actually, we're given the authority to do that ourselves.
This is also one of the things that I've really bought into is you have to essentially really think of this as a long game. The short game mindset is never going to work for creating long-term buy-in or changing a culture. And yeah, while it is unbelievably painful to have that ambiguity, and there have been times where I know Bill has yelled at Timothy and I've been like, well, just tell us what. And I swear I'll do it for you, anything. Like, do you want their firstborn? Like, just tell me. Sometimes that's how it is. The idea that we are going to work through this, and I think Jessica Milby's group is a perfect example where that buy-in was created because those people struggled through that issue together. And he was patient enough to be hands-off and let them come to those terms, because then there is that sense of ownership. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Other questions?
Okay.
We had a whole row of our coworkers that are dead silent. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for the help.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.